China shock is a shorthand term for the very disruptive integration of China into Western trade.
It's not just artificial intelligence, it's electric vehicles, it's solar cells, it's batteries, it's robotics, it's fission, it's fusion.
The global economy is shifting fast, and a storm is brewing. Economists call it China Shock 2.0, a second wave of disruption that could make the first one look small. Factories, jobs, and even entire industries may be on the line. Let's break down what's really happening. The first China shock. Back at the turn of the century, between 1999 and 2007, the United States went through what economists later named the China shock. This was the period when China's rise as a manufacturing powerhouse collided with America's economy in full force. The roots of this shift went back to the late 1970s, when China began moving away from Maoist central planning and into a market economy. Millions of workers left collective farms and poured into factories, while massive amounts of capital were redirected into industrial production. By the early 2000s, the result was a flood of inexpensive goods on global markets. For the United States, the impact was devastating. Economists David Autor of MIT, Gordon Hanson of Harvard, and David Dorn of the University of Zurich later showed how Chinese import competition permanently damaged parts of the American economy. Jobs vanished at scale. Almost a quarter of U.S. manufacturing positions were wiped out in less than a decade. Towns that had long depended on industry were gutted. Martinsville, Virginia, once known for its sweatshirt production, and High Point, North Carolina, once the furniture capital of the world, saw their economic foundations collapse. Similar stories played out across industries like textiles, toys, sporting goods, plastics, electronics, and auto parts. And unlike past downturns, these workers didn't bounce back. 20 years later, many still hadn't recovered their earnings or found stable jobs. Even where employment has returned, it's often in lower-wage industries, far from the middle-class manufacturing work that once defined entire regions. When the first shock paused. By around 2015, though, the first shock had run its course. China's transition from rural agriculture to urban industry was largely complete. U.S. manufacturing employment even began to rebound. It rose under President Barack Obama, kept climbing during Donald Trump's first term, and has also grown under President Joe Biden. Some policymakers took this as a sign that the worst was over. But Autor and Hanson argue this view is dangerously short-sighted. They warn that the real challenge isn't in the past, it's in what's coming next. The arrival of China Shock 2.0. So what is China Shock 2.0? Unlike the first wave, which was about sneakers, sweatshirts, and other labor-intensive goods, the second wave is about high-tech dominance. China is no longer the underdog in the global economy. It's competing directly in the sectors that once seemed like America's natural domain. This includes aviation, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, robotics, microprocessors, nuclear and fusion power, quantum computing, biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, solar technology, and advanced batteries. These industries aren't just profitable, they create high-wage jobs, they carry enormous geopolitical weight, and they form the backbone of military strength. Autor and Hanson warn that if America loses leadership here, it risks far more than lost jobs. It could lose its role at the technological frontier and its ability to shape the global order. How research rankings flipped. Evidence shows how rapidly China has advanced. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute reported that between 2003 and 2007, the US led China in 60 of 64 frontier technologies, measured by share of the world's most cited research. By 2023, those rankings had flipped. China was ahead in 57 of 64, while the US led in just 7. Back in 2007, China had only a handful of global research leaders. By 2023, all of the world's top 10 institutions in certain technologies were based in China, producing 9 times more high-impact research papers than the second-ranked country, usually the United States. Specific fields tell the story. In 2017, China accounted for 46% of the most cited research in electric batteries, while the US had 25%. In AI algorithms and hardware accelerators, China had 38% to America's 15%. In advanced optical communication, China's share was 37% against 15% for the US. In advanced magnets and superconductors, China led 28% to 16%. Even in areas where the US held the lead, such as natural language processing, quantum sensors, and quantum computing, the margins were narrow and shrinking. In other words, China was no longer trailing. It was competing head-to-head, and in many areas, already ahead. The race for artificial general intelligence. Layered onto this is the race for artificial general intelligence, or AGI. This is the concept of computers achieving not just task-specific intelligence, but the ability to think, learn, and self-improve across almost all cognitive fields. Some call this the singularity. Once dismissed as science fiction, it's now widely seen as plausible within years, not centuries. Whichever country gets to AGI first will effectively shape the future. It won't just be an economic win, it will embed political systems, ideologies, and global influence for generations. That's why both the US and China are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into AI research each year. Despite America's early lead in supercomputing and AI labs, its strategy risks falling short. Policies under the Trump administration often focus backward, on trying to restore lost manufacturing, rather than forward, on securing leadership in the technologies that will matter most. Why tariffs don't work? One of the main tools the US has leaned on in recent years is tariffs. But economists argue this is the wrong approach for today's challenges. Tariffs might succeed in bringing back some assembly line jobs, but those jobs tend to be low-wage and unstable. They don't build leadership and innovation. As Otter and Hansen put it, one thing that tariffs alone will never do is make the United States an attractive place to innovate. They argue tariffs have a role, but only as precision tools, precision munitions, in their words, not as blanket landmines that harm allies and adversaries alike. Trump's broad tariff strategy, what some call tariffs on everything, everywhere, all at once, would have failed in a trade war 20 years ago. Today, at best, it risks bringing back what the economists describe as tedious and poorly paid assembly jobs, while leaving the US further behind in the real race. Dollar hegemony and the digital yuan. The challenges aren't limited to technology. America's position as the issuer of the world's reserve currency, dollar hegemony, is also under stress. Trump's chief economic advisor, Stephen Moran, has argued that dollar dominance contributes to US deindustrialization. Combined with Trump's push to weaken the dollar to make exports cheaper, the strategy risks undermining confidence in the dollar globally. China, meanwhile, is promoting the digital yuan as an alternative for cross-border trade. Countries that have faced US tariffs or sanctions are already asking why they should continue using the dollar when Washington can weaponize it. Brazil selling soybeans to China is one example. Why use the dollar when tariffs could suddenly be imposed for political reasons? As US influence has waned in parts of Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, China has been quick to expand its reach. This isn't just economic competition, it's geopolitical repositioning. China's long-term strategy. Part of China's success comes from deliberate industrial policy. Starting under Jiang Zemin in the late 1990s, China massively expanded its university system with a focus on STEM fields. Today, that investment is producing dividends in the form of research leadership and technological breakthroughs. China has also nurtured industry leaders from scratch. Companies like Huawei in telecommunications, BYD in electric vehicles, and Longai in solar technology are now globally dominant despite being virtually unknown 3 decades ago. It has also targeted supply chain choke points. Rare earth minerals, essential for high-tech manufacturing, are one area where China holds enormous leverage. The recent standoff over NVIDIA's H20 chip exports showed how these choke points can be used strategically. Washington lifted its ban on NVIDIA sales after Beijing countered with rare earth restrictions. Far from weakening China, the ban only spurred faster efforts to develop homegrown alternatives, what Otter and Hansen propose. So how should the US respond? Otter and Hansen offer a clear 4-part plan. First, America must work with allies. The European Union, Japan, Canada, Mexico, South Korea, the UK, and Australia, instead of alienating them with tariffs. A united front is stronger than a fractured one. Second, the US should encourage Chinese companies to build facilities on American soil. This creates local jobs and forces US companies to sharpen their competitiveness. It's the same strategy China once used when it welcomed Western firms into its markets to accelerate technology transfer. Third, Washington should aggressively promote innovation in emerging fields, from drones to advanced semiconductors. Public investment and venture funds can help drive this forward, much as US industrial policy did during World War II. The key is to pick the right battles, industries that are both winnable and critical, such as semiconductors and rare earth minerals. Finally, America must do a better job protecting workers from disruption. That means extending unemployment insurance, expanding retraining programs, and strengthening community colleges to give displaced workers a path into new industries. Without this, the social costs of economic change will weaken public support for any strategy. The stakes ahead. The warning is clear. Stop fighting the last trade war and meet the current challenge. Unlike the first China shock, which faded once China's industrial transition was complete, China Shock 2.0 won't simply end. It will last as long as China has the resources and determination to compete. For the US, the question isn't whether it can bring back the old jobs, it's whether it can remain at the technological frontier. If America fails, the consequences won't just be about employment or wages. They'll be about the nation's role in the global order, its military power, and its ability to shape the technologies that define the future. And with artificial general intelligence looming, the stakes may be higher than at any other moment in modern history. Whoever reaches that milestone first may very well shape the next century. China Shock 2.0 isn't coming someday, it's already underway. What do you think? Will America rise to the challenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.